welcome back to another edition of the Ad Podcast. Today we have an awesome guest for you guys. Duke Stump is the Chief Brand Officer of Tractor Beverage Company, where he leads the evolution of the brand and drives creative strategy at the intersection of purpose, culture, and sustainability. Tractor Beverage is basically sourcing all their ingredients from regenerative farming. So it's a really cool sustainability story, along with being an exploding beverage brand. He has experience from major consumer brands and a track record for pushing boundaries in marketing and storytelling. Duke is focused on amplifying Tractor's mission of organic regenerative impact and connecting deeply with consumers through authentic brand experiences. Duke, thanks for coming on, man.
No, it's great to be here, Dylan. Thank you.
So I had the pleasure of interviewing a guest a few hours ago who knows you. So I got to hear a little bit of your story secondhand, but tell me a little bit about where you grew up, where'd you study, and what got you into the industry?
Sure. So I grew up a child of the late 60s in outside of Chicago. Actually started my early youth on a farm. My parents were high school teachers. We rented this incredible farmhouse. It was mainly just corn and horses. But grew up, I had two amazing parents. My mom was just this bottle of possibility. She just was a total dreamer in many ways. And my dad was fascinating because he would never answer anything I asked him. He would give me a question to my question, which I actually loved because that gave me agency around the role of inquiry in life and curiosity. So that part was great. I played a lot of sports growing up and played hockey. So in college, I went to University of Vermont, played hockey there. And the interesting thing is, you got to remember, this is early 80s. There was a couple interesting things. One, I was economics major. Greed was good,
Oh, yeah, the old Gordon Gekko days.
Yeah, totally. It was like we're all going to Wall Street. Didn't really enjoy the major, but I loved philosophy. So I took as many philosophy classes as possible. In fact, my college counselor would be like, what are you going to do with this? I said, I don't know. It just feels so right. But at the same time, also just down the street was Ben and Jerry's.
Oh, okay.
It really lit me up in the sense that, I'm learning about business in school, but I'm watching these guys down the street, like, dismantle everything I'm learning. So I was like, I really like that model down the street. It seems a lot more invigorating and fun. And so I got out of school, played a year of hockey in Sweden, but then I moved back to the States. And I was fortunate to join Nike. And I spent 16 incredible years at Nike, doing all sorts of things, and lastly, VP of product at one of the subsidiaries. And then I made this really interesting decision to leave Nike. I was just yearning for something different, to be challenged differently. And I went to seventh generation.
Oh, yeah. That's the organic clean. My wife is she only cleans the house with vinegar at this point, but at some point she used seventh generation.
Yeah, I have to say, at the time it was 50 people, 50 million. So you imagine coming from Nike to this like little thing, but I reveled in it because it was mission based. It was about reimagining corporate responsibility in addition to environmental progression. And that was just fun as hell. And then later in life, I became the EVP of brand of community at Lululemon.
Oh, wow.
For about 4.5 years. And that was fun. That was a hard one in the sense that it was rebuilding that brand. I joined in fall of 2014 when Wall Street Journal said it would be the #1 brand that wouldn't exist in 2015 behind BlackBerry and Sears. But I love that. I love either things that are nascent, new, or struggling.
Yeah, challenging.
Yeah, and so long story short, a year and a half ago, I've been familiar with Tractor because I had been an advisor, and one of the founders was like, "Hey, do you think you'd want to come in house?" And reflecting on my career, I think it was that 7 generation period where I loved, like, when you have a small community, small culture. You're kind of a Lilliputian amongst the giants. And it's like, how do you, make it all work? And you have living from scarcity for resources, but I thrive on that. And so I've been here a year and a half, and I have to say it's been one of the most rewarding journeys in my 35 plus professional career.
I love it, man. That's awesome. Well, I love your story. We'll get into some of the weaves and turns, I'm sure, throughout the interview. But before we dive too much into your history, why don't we talk about Tractor for a minute? Because, I'm obviously aware of the brand, but I don't know if it has ubiquitous penetration yet in the market, both from an awareness perspective or a distribution perspective. So, who is Tractor, and where can people find them, either in grocery or convenience or direct to consumer?
Yeah, I mean, Tractor was founded roughly 10 years ago. It's farmer founded, employee owned, and our focus is on bringing organic, non-GMO beverages to the world. It started in a rather unorthodox place or unconventional. It started in food service. So most people would start in retail, but the leadership at the time, which I think was actually quite smart, was like, no, let's go into a different world where I think actually the entry point was just a little bit more accessible. And so we've had a long history of being in food service, where we have a big partnership with Chipotle. So if you go into Chipotle, we're in college and university. We're in a variety of just different food service arteries. And then something new for us is we actually created a new product, RTD, or what we say cans and hands, called the Haymaker. We are launching in Sprouts, in all Sprouts, 400 Sprouts locations beginning Jan 1. So that's a new partnership with us. We're thrilled to be working with the Sprouts team. They're just I liken it to when I was at 7th Generation. We partnered with Whole Foods back in the day with like John Mackey and Walter Robb, and it's like a very similar vibe for me. So yeah, we will be our first venture into retail. We have a mantra, grow strong. So we're not trying to be the biggest. We're just like, whatever we do, like, how do we do it the right way? And so we feel like one great partner right now is the best path for us.
That's great. I love Sprouts. I feel like they're the approachable, organic, healthy food store. A lot of the healthy food stores can be sometimes looked at, like the old Whole Foods moniker was whole paycheck, right? So it's like but what I love about Sprouts, you can go in and you can get bin almonds for, by the pound, and it's a little bit more accessible when you're on a budget. And I think a lot of Americans and a lot of consumers are thinking about that these days.
Yeah, and I think that, like Jack, their CEO, I really love how he and the team think strategically, and it's just been a really amazing partnership. We were just out at their headquarters in Phoenix, and culminated. We love to have farm-to-table dinners on farms, so we were this incredible farm, literally like a stone's throw from the city. It was hard to imagine we were in this beautiful farmland. And I think for us, Kevin, our CEO, always talks about it. We're not into transactions, we're into relationships. And that sounds cliche and corny, but we actually, like, for us, that's a huge piece. Like, do we want to hang with these people? Do we trust these people? And the Sprouts team has been fantastic.
Yeah, they are really stand up for sure. I've met a few people from the organization throughout the years. So let's talk a little bit about your guys' supply chain, because I feel like, that's really core to your DNA. So you guys stand for only sourcing your ingredients and your supply chain from regenerative farming, or farmers that are, doing things the right way, so to speak. So can you tell me a little bit about, how did that culminate, and what are some of the criteria that you look for in those partnerships, and how does that inform, how you guys storytell and how you guys bring marketing messaging to consumers?
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to the origin story with our three founders. I mean, their desire at that time was, at first they were thinking, Travis, a farmer. It was like, let's build a restaurant with just only clean, natural ingredients. And then I think the size of that was maybe a little daunting. So it's like, all right, let's just do drinks, because they were looking at what was available in beverages. And so the whole strategy from the very beginning, and just a slight correction, was we sourced from organic, some regenerative,
Organic, got it.
organic farms throughout the world. And what's really interesting is, it's challenging, obviously, because you have to find the materials, but also you have a pretty rigorous audit process. I think we have something like 5 to 6 audits and certification mechanisms from the time of sourcing to the time in the finished product. But that has been a seminal trait of this brand since day one, is to really support this idea of organic. And I think in many ways for us, it's all about soil. Like our desire is to have people fall in love with soil again, and the beauty of what healthy soil means in this world.
I love that. And do you think you talked about this being, one of the most rewarding chapters in your career? Do you think any of that kind of harkens back to the days that you spent on the farm growing up? Like, do you feel a connection to the farmers of America, having come from that world yourself?
Yeah, I mean, well, when you grow up in the Midwest, man, especially back in the day, like it was a lot of farmland. And I think to see my life even full circle. And I spent 8 years of my life on the board of something called the Biomimicry Institute. And it's really how you look at nature as a mentor. So I think just being connected to the natural world for me is just, I find that inspiring and motivating. And so that definitely has been a big piece.
Yeah, and you live in Ojai now. I'm sure that it's not an accident. I was living in Santa Barbara during the pandemic, and we couldn't get access to farmers markets, but the Ojai farmers markets were the first ones to open up. So we would head up there on the weekends and go to the farmers markets in Ojai. Ojai, I feel like, is a really good kind of example of kind of like a agricultural world that kind of is like coming up against this kind of new age, like bunch of like entrepreneurs and hippies and kind of interesting new transplants of people moving into Ojai and kind of rubbing shoulders with the traditional agricultural roots. Like, how do you see, where you've decided to live kind of playing into, your sensibility that you bring to the role as chief brand officer at Tractor?
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways, independent of large industrial ag, but Ojai is a little bit of a microcosm in the sense that we have conventional farmers and we have organic farmers. And I think, a lot of our dear friends are conventional farmers. And sometimes there's this tension between conventional and organic. And it's one of the reasons, for example, we do 1% for planet, 1% of our revenue goes to a foundation we established called Farmhand, which is based here in Ojai. And Whitney Clapper, who's leading that, is an ex-Patagonia. She's just a stalwart. But I think for us, it's not judging or dictating the path forward. For us, it's like learning and supporting, what it means to have healthy soil. And so it's literally listening, working with conventional farmers, and it's listening, working with organic farmers, all under the guise of like, how do we support people as best we can, with the goal ultimately, like, yeah, it would be great if everyone was organic. But I also know from conventional farmers, man, life's hard. It's not it's not like there's an embarrassment of riches in conventional. Everything is hard. And so even transitioning can be a challenge. So how do we help farmers in that transitional mode? Like, from conventional, organic is like, it's called transitional crop. So it's not organic per se, but like, what do you do? And so we're trying to figure out ways, for example, that we can help farmers with that so that they can build that bridge to the organic farming.
Yeah, that's cool. Before we turned on the camera, you talked a little bit about some government programs that are coming on board that kind of are supporting this style of farming. How do you guys see your brand as an advocate, and are you able to tap into some of those programs from an advocacy perspective, or amplify them, or use it to help educate folks that want to go organic or regenerative that are in that, like you mentioned, transitional mode?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a couple quick things. One is we're not into politics, but we do enjoy policy.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things, we're the official partner of Farm Aid. So at Farm Aid, we launched an advocacy program called We the Soil. And right now, within the Farm Bill, less than 1% of that is towards organic.
Crazy.
Which is kind of mind numbing as the number. And then, obviously there's been legislation on what to do going forward. So for us, it's making sure that we feel that there's a voice. We say we like to be inspired protagonists, not antagonists, but how do we get people inspired to rethink how we're looking at the Farm Bill, or how we share funds across the board. What's interesting is, like, even last week, the US government acknowledged $750 million in grants for regenerative farming.
Wow.
There's policy that run counter to that. So at the same time, they're opening up pesticide use. But I think the mere fact that regenerative farming is a conversation is a huge leap forward. Now, where it goes from here is up to a lot of us. But it's inspiring to think. And by the way, just a small little data point. For Gen Z, sustainable agriculture out indexes sustainable fashion. And so you have a generation that actually understands soil in a different way, but also just healthy soil is healthy people. Like, what we eat and where we eat it from is an important piece. So I don't think there's a finish line, Dylan, in all of this, but it's I think it to not be involved or to sit back and be apathetic is not something for us. In fact, we always say hope is a function of action. And so what's the action or intention that we want to express?
I love that. You mentioned Ben and Jerry's as a brand that you lived down the street from in college. We obviously know them as an advocacy brand. Maybe they sit a little bit more on the protagonist side of their marketing agenda. They're not shy about declaring exactly who they're for, what they're for, et cetera. Mm-hmm. What did you kind of learn from watching Ben and Jerry's from afar that you liked? And it sounds like you're taking a different approach that is a little bit more, let's be productive, let's not be polarizing. How did you come to that sensibility as a marketer, and why did you decide that that's the right approach versus kind of maybe the antagonist methodology that Ben and Jerry's might employ?
Yeah, well, first of all, I will say I have always loved, I think, the creativity approach from Ben and Jerry's, but also the grassroots. I mean, to me, the natural world is bottom up, and I think it is very grassroots oriented. So I really applaud that. And since day one, they've been unapologetic on who they are. So I feel like they identify, this is us and this is who we are. I think for us, what I learned at Nike is, I would always say we were in the business of bottling inspiration, and everyone else made sneakers and tees. So you wouldn't tell an athlete, hey, you're out, or someone, you're out of shape or whatever. That I'm not sure that's going to get you to the results you want, but inspiring people, like, that's a different thing. Like, we used to have this unwritten rule at Nike: if you see someone run alongside of the road and you're driving, regardless of how slow, how fit they were, you always just give them a thumbs up. You're like, you're out here, like, that's it.
Got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. And so I think what I learned in that day is, like, wow, if you can inspire people, I think there's a far greater likelihood you can shift people. And I also don't think trying to convince someone of something is a path forward. And so for us, this inspired protagonist is a little bit of Maya Angelou, like, nothing solved by hate. And so our approach is, we're going to get into the meaty subjects, but we're going to do it in a way that's trying to be positive and progressive.
I love that. I talked a little bit about your time in Nike. Obviously, that 16 years is going to make some lasting imprints on you as a marketer. Nike has been under some fire in recent times for maybe going a little, letting the pendulum swing a little bit too far to the performance side of the marketing funnel, and losing some of that inspiration that they used to bottle up when you were there. I don't know if you're in a position or if you feel comfortable commenting on the current state of Nike as someone who spent so much time there, but if you would be willing, I would love to hear your current take on, how they're doing and how they can get back to, where they once were.
Well, it's like anything. When you have an incredibly unique culture, I think you need to have leadership that truly understands the essence of what that culture is about. And I think the previous leadership, that was a blind spot. But I'm very bullish right now. Elliot Hill, someone I've known for years. He was, I think he was there a couple years before I joined in 1990. He's an outstanding leader. I think he understands the brand. And to me, it's the art and science. Like, you can do performance, you can do growth, but you also have to do things that nurture and cultivate the brand and the spirit of that. So what is that? And it can be experiential, so many different things. But I really love where he's taking things. It's going to take time. He's got to restart the product engine. He's got to he's reframed the team pretty well over the last, he hasn't been there that long. But to me, it just shows like the role of leadership and impacting a company, but it also sets an ethos. And I'll just give you an example, even at Tractor. When people say, tell me about Tractor, I said, let me tell you about Kevin, our CEO. He's the son of a Cuban immigrant, grew up in New Jersey. He was a philosophy major in school. He went to live in an Apache community in Chama, New Mexico for 2 years, which, once again, pretty unorthodox or unconventional path. And then he became a principal in Watts for 10 years. And now he's leading our business. But he comes at, we talk a lot about business as unusual. The approach is he understands the spirit of our culture and brand really well. And he allows us then to play in a really unique way. I think Elliot's doing the same thing at Nike. And so once again, that leadership, just understanding the cultural ethos and allowing it to flourish, or creating the conditions for it to flourish, is imperative.
I love that. You just talked a little bit about your founder's background, feeling a little bit maybe unconventional, but has gone through some very interesting life experiences to lead him to start Tractor. As a challenger brand, how do you leverage founder-led storytelling? Obviously, you're mentioning it on the podcast today. How is that a superpower for you guys to punch above your weight class, being able to lean into this idea that people are now identifying with founders as much as they're identifying with brands, and kind of putting them out as the chief evangelist for the company? How are you guys doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is Kevin, who I referenced as our CEO, wasn't one of the founders, but what he's
interesting.
Yeah, but what he's done, and our founders are two of the three founders are still very active. In fact, they lead our product innovation. One of the things we did actually when I first got here is we went back to this idea of founder's intent, and we don't have a mission statement or purpose statement. We literally live by these kind of three pillars in founder's intent, and it was going back to understand what was the spirit and the behavior and the mindset when this brand started that we need to make sure is always consistent in the red thread, regardless of who's leading this company. And so I think what Kevin does really well is he just takes founder's intent, and it's, it is being an inspired protagonist. It's the idea of soil and soul, and it's something called the hope gap. How do we close the hope gap? And there's a whole list of a little bit of a manifesto there. And so what's nice, so I think when you talk about founder storytelling, I think it's more about making sure, if you truly believe in it, that the essence of that original founder story is in your every deliberation. And so you see it show up everywhere. And that's where we put just a lot of time and energy and rigor around, is just, are we doing it in a way that considers the founder's intent?
Yeah, that's cool. It's almost like, being a constitutionalist or something, right? Like going back to, does the documents line up with, what the founders intended, so to speak? I
find it's pretty interesting, Dylan. I think like a lot of companies where they've lost their way over time. You lose sight of why the thing even originated, because more often than not, that why, I think, is still relevant, even if it's 10 years or 2 decades. I mean, in the case of Nike, it's 50 years later. It's the reason Phil Knight started it and speared it. It's still relevant today at Nike.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. I think any brand that's struggling might want to use that as a workshop, right? Like, study your founder, study the founding story. I've seen a lot of brands kind of like building museums and kind of having like making their founding documents and some of their artifacts like readily available, not just to the team, but also to the public. Walmart just created a really cool museum in Bentonville where you can kind of cruise around and see the story of like how the company progressed, and here's all the iterations of the logo. And I think that's it's also a good storytelling mechanism, I think, too, to kind of talk about that nostalgia element that you're seeing show up, at least in a lot of like brands that were big in the 90s, especially right now, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like, in that unearthing from the founders and just listening to them, for us, what was like so key is what was the behavior? What was the thinking and the behavior that informed how you operated? And when we created this Hope Gap manifesto, like, there's a couple lines. Like, what was really clear is we're outsiders standing at the edge of the familiar. And we, like Kevin, our CEO, always jokes, like, we're feral, like, meaning I will say I love it, because beverage industry to me is like one giant youth soccer game. The ball goes in the corner and everyone just goes screaming in there. And so for us as outsiders, we're like, no, let's go to open space. Where is that? Like, even us doing the Haymaker and Sprouts is a good example. And then the other line for us is our adversary is the quiet seduction of the status quo. And so the founders really challenge the status quo almost at every level. And so that is another behavior for us. It's like, okay, how would we do this? Here's, sorry, I'll give you an example. Like, when I first got here, we were going to have a sales meeting in Bourbon Street in New Orleans. And Kevin, our CEO, is like, this feels so off brand. And so he said, what can you and the team create? And we created this thing called Farm Camp. And we did 4 cohorts of all our culture. We brought them to Ojai for this really unique experience. And now we bring our partners into Farm Camp. But it was our way to challenge the status quo. In fact, Fast Company just called it one of the, we just won an award for innovation in the workplace. But it's that thinking, Dylan, to me, is that's the gold. It's like, wow, we have a permission slip to do these things because it's embedded in the founder's intent.
I love that. You talked about a couple of concepts that I think immerse the team and partners into the world of which your products are being sourced, or at least the ingredients thereof, which is farms. So you've talked about a concept around farm to table dinners and inviting partners into that. You've talked about this idea of farm camp, where you're sending the team and partners to experience what a organic or regenerative farm looks like and what happens in those places. I wonder if that is also an opportunity for your content marketing. Do you guys film, content, a lot of content at farms? Do you invite influencers to these farms to table dinners or these farm camps to amplify those stories? Like, how does that show up in the marketing that people don't get to experience in the real world?
Yeah. I mean, we love to break rules. So beyond what you just shared, we also created this thing called the Mad Farmer Tour. And the Mad Farmer Tour was inspired by Wendell Berry's Mad Farmer Manifesto. And mad doesn't mean angry, it means wildly enthusiastic. And so we built out this custom Airstream it's really insane, truthfully. And we crisscross across the country, meeting farmers, people connected to the world of soil. I think it was something like 30,000 miles. We did 65 of 65 planned events. And along the way, we captured a lot of content, met a lot of people. So from a content generation, I think just being out in the road, and also it's not even what we create. I think it's what others create when they experience it is the real magic. And then we bring in people in partnership. So we had a farm camper recently, and there's this amazing farmer, Noah from Nebraska. I think he's got like over 1 million TikTok
I love
followers.
that.
And he's just a first generation farmer. And his whole thing is like, I want to show the world what it's like to be a farmer and kind of debunk some of the stigma and mystery around what farming is. And so it's a range of things. Like we're not doing one thing or the other, but I think it comes down to this simple premise for us is our mission is to how do we get people to see, feel, and trust this thing called Tractor? Now the art form is we could do pull a lot of different levers, but that at the heart is that's what we're trying to do from a brand point of view. And it's going back to Kevin, our CEO, like he always just say, make it original. Like, don't copy anything. Make sure whatever you're doing. And so the last thing I'll share on that is, I always thought it would be cool to be an editorial brand or media brand. And back in my day at Lululemon, I partnered with Vice, who during their heyday,
Sure, of course.
I thought they were just incredible. And so we hired a bunch of Vice alums, and we created the Future Farmer Almanac, and it's a sci-fi, cli-fi site called tractorbeam.earth, and it's not solar punk, we call it soil punk, and it's taken on, Dylan, a life of its own. Like we started with the first editorial issue at the beginning of the year, and I think there was 20 submissions. Now we're getting over 500 submissions per each quarter. We do a new drop. And I think it's things like that. Like, and once again, as an inspired protagonist, we think the whole narrative is how do we show a vision and stretch people's minds around the future, but in as Stanley Robinson, the sci-fi guy, would say, optopian point of view, not dystopian, but utopian or optopian. And that's just been fun. And so when it's for us, getting people to see and feel this thing can manifest in so many different ways.
I love that. I want to explore something you mentioned about the farm tour. So you mentioned that there was a first generation farmer that has over 1 million followers on TikTok. Farm talk has been a exploding influencer category. Before we flipped on the camera, I told you I did some work for a client who main supply relationship is farmers and ranchers. And I found quite a few farm influencers and farm talkers myself in my research. I think this also points to a trend on social where people have some kind of an obsession with the muscular class and the people who do things outside of an office, like people who cut grass or polish auto body, interiors of cars, or work on a farm or work with heavy machinery, people who do things with their hands. Why do you think social media, especially TikTok, is exploding with people who just want to watch people do what some would consider, like maybe the guys themselves think that this is silly, why is anybody watching me? But people are really obsessed with kind of the muscular class, I feel like right now. Do you have any thoughts on why that is becoming so popular?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the muscular class other than, let me ask you a question. Tell me a time where you felt most alive.
That's a good question. I mean, I think for me, it's, being on a surf trip, probably like traveling around the country and surfing and stopping in little towns and going surfing for a week or two.
So I asked that question. I took a risk asking you. You might have said safe, like something different. But 95% of the time, when I have people that question, they're outside.
Ooh, yep.
Not indoors.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I think the ability, what's probably the gravitation for a lot of this is like my oldest daughter lives in Vancouver, Canada. She was an organic farmer. And it's hard ass work, man. But she was like, every day I'm like outside, you know, and now she's inside and she's like, I can't do it. I need to be out. And so I think as a lot of us are just beholden to a computer screen or whatever, we're watching people out creating and doing. And I think the other thing which we miss in the farming piece is when it's done well, it really breeds and builds a strong sense of community. Like Soul at State New York, like what they're doing around community, insane. And we've worked with so many different farms where it's not about an individual farmer, but it's about the land itself and the community that's a part of that. Like we give our annual gift to all of our employees is a CSA membership. So communities.
Yeah, I get it every Friday on my front doorstep, and it's only $30, and you can feed a whole family of 5 with it.
It's insane. But for us, it's important that our internal culture is always connected to their local, soil and farming community. And I just think, Dylan, for me, like you have a youthful generation in particular that's questioning a lot of things. And so the ideal or the appeal, I think, of when things are done outside is there's a romance around it. It's also what I like about Noah, the Nebraska farmer. I think it's called Shiloh Farm, by the way, his Insta handle. But he shares the hard part of it. But I think that's the beauty of it. It's like, it's hard, but it's worth it, you know? Like,
you're good.
Okay.
So you were just wrapping up talking about Shiloh Farms, the TikToker that you guys worked with, which kind of led me to another idea, going to farmers markets here in North County, San Diego. A brand that I saw popping up before it became national was Bitchin' Sauce, the almond sauce down here. Do you think farmers markets, do you think brands, especially like challenger brands or brands that are getting started, do you think they, undercut like how valuable a farmers market strategy could be to their brand? And have you guys thought about that, since you guys are so tied into the farmer community?
It's a great question. One of the gentlemen I've met, he actually lives here in Ohio, is James Freeman, and he created Blue Bottle Coffee.
Oh, wow. Yeah. The famous coffee shop that was sold to Nestle.
Right. That started at a farmer's market in Marin. And he talks about how that was the place to be in the community. And it's also a great way to tell a story. I mean, what better way than you're just one-on-one, like interacting with someone with an engaged audience. And so, and I feel there's a variety of interesting brands that have origins in that space. So for us, when we think about our new RTD, the Haymaker, Alex Ring, who's leading our community program, one of the initiatives for him is how do we then begin to support and be a part of the farmers market experience? Because we feel like here in Ohio, once again, it's like we have 2 of them that are incredible, but it's where the soil punks in our world live. And it's the community, I think, that matters most for us right now.
I love that. I wanted to explore a little bit on the food service angle. So, I consulted for a direct-to-consumer wine brand called Los Cuernos that basically put good wine in a can. And they had their main channel that's popping for them is QSR, because there's not always great wine options at QSR. Wine is usually in glass. It has corks. It requires,
Right.
tableware. Why was food service and QSR, a strategy for you guys? And how do you think that has been a outlier in propelling the growth of your brand? How did that become almost like a superpower in a way?
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of our business in food service is done in a bubbler or a machine. So we provide concentrate, and then there's
so it's wholesale, not an end brand experience with the consumer.
No, it is end brand. So, for example,
cool.
If you walk into Chipotle, for example, you would see the bubbler machines, and you see what Tractor branded based on the 3 or 4.
Got it.
flavors that we would offer. I mean, I will say in the world of beverages, you have Big Blue and Big Red that have a lot of contractual strength and leverage across a lot of things. And so for us going into the pathway we took with food service, in particular with bubblers and specific partners, enabled us to get that presence in the learning in a way that now has allowed us to think about how do we extend into retail with the Haymaker launch in January.
I love that. What advice would you give to marketers that are trying to build brands in crowded commodity categories? Obviously Liquid Death came out and completely upended the water space. Are there a few tips that marketers that want to launch in crowded categories might think about as they start to plan their go-to-market?
It's interesting, Dylan. I've learned this at Nike and I'm forever grateful. I think competition is an archaic thought, but to be successful, you have to think different. So at Nike, it wasn't, I always say you have to ask a fundamental question. What does the world need most that you're most uniquely qualified to offer? So at Nike, it was this idea of bringing inspiration and innovation to every athlete, modeling inspiration. Back in the day, like Adidas made great shoes, man. Like they're German engineering. It's not like everyone else, no one was making good product, but we tapped into an emotional appeal based on, once again, what does the world need in, inspiration and innovation? And what are we most uniquely qualified to deliver? The same thing, truthfully, when I got to Lululemon it wasn't about, hey, let's just make black stretchy pants and compete like hell in a day-to-day. It was, no, actually, like there was this idea of the mindful athlete that was really appealing to us. And so how do all of our actions and behaviors build towards that? And so in a Tractor, it's the founder's intent, but it's the idea of soil and soul. Soil is the foundation of living and soul is the foundation of life. And so to me, you have to if you go into it like right away in your first slide and a deck is a competitive matrix, I think you've lost the plot. I really believe that. But that's how we're taught, right? Hey, what's the competitive landscape? And for me, like the starting point is ask that fundamental question and realize that there's a rational, probably great, unique product thing, but then there's also emotional. And so how do you blend those two? And great brands do that incredibly well. I mean, Patagonia creates great product, but then the emotional appeal of like, man, we're trying to save the environment. Check. Got it. Like, makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's a philosophical question for me in that I think it really requires us to, as I always say, or Janine and biomimicry would say, quiet our cleverness. Like we have to think differently, almost from first principle thought versus taking a pre-existing solution and just building on that.
Yeah, it's almost like, why should your brand exist versus what problem is it solving in the market?
Yeah, and it's a little bit of both, right? But it's just, I think once again, like I don't want to show up every day and have to like fight and compete. That's exhausting. But that's literally how the vast majority of businesses operate. I think if you can figure out like this art form a bit, then man, you have a completely different pathway. Like at Nike, yeah, we understood the competition who was out there. We didn't talk about them. It's like, yeah, okay. I think the same thing for us at Tractor. Every day it feels like a company, but how do we actually, think differently about that and not get caught up in that youth soccer game mentality of like, oh my God, we got to go into this corner and fight everybody. Like I think there's a better way.
Yeah. It's probably more important to be obsessed about your customer than the competition.
Leading a customer to something they couldn't imagine, being attuned to all the signals of what's going on there. Yeah. Like it's so many other things other than, because then I think you can easily jump into fear. And to me, that's a giant cancer cell for any culture. Like when you live in a place of fear or desperation, I think you're screwed.
Good luck, right?
Yeah. It's not a great place for anybody.
Awesome, man. Well, I think that's probably a good place to stop. This has been a fascinating conversation, Duke. I really appreciate you spending some time with the audience today. If people want to connect with you directly or try Tractor Beverages, where would you like to send them?
Tractor Beverages, first and foremost, you can find it at a variety of food services, including partners like Chipotle. And then Jan 1, the Haymaker RTD in all Sprouts locations across the country. And personally, I'm not a big social guy, but I am on LinkedIn. Although all it says is I'm a wannabe poet. So
staying low key. I like it. Awesome, man. Well, enjoy the holiday season up there in Ojai. I hope you get some rest and relaxation. And for those of you who are watching the show for the very first time today, don't forget to give us a like or a follow. If you're listening to the show, an honest review is how we find a larger audience organically. And if there is a beverage marketer out there or a marketer who needs to maybe think a little bit about these founding principle ideas, or just somebody who you think would really enjoy the conversation that I had with Duke today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, Duke, I will go ahead and bid you a good day. Thanks, my friend.
Thanks, Dylan. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye-bye.